Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Melissa Keller, and I work with the Department of State. This is our second webinar in this series today that we're offering to help DRI and New York Forward project sponsors better understand our decarbonization compliance paths. The focus of today's webinar will be on third-party certification. We're having additional webinars in this series on New York Stretch, which will take place on June 3rd. And then we'll also be offering an additional webinar discussing decarbonization of historic buildings and structures that'll take place on June 11th. Just a couple of things before we get into the presentation. I want to let you all know that this webinar will be recorded and available for viewing later on. We'll be posting this webinar and the others in this series to our decarbonization website. So once the series is complete, you'll be able to find them up there. I also want to mention, if you have any questions during the presentation, please put those in the chat and we'll do a little Q&A session at the end to answer any questions that you have. And with that, I'll turn it over to John with the NYF team, who will be taking us through the first bit of this presentation. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is John Balf, Senior Project Manager with the NYF team. I'll talk a little bit more about our role in this project, and then you'll hear a bit from my colleague, Michelle Hendrick, who will lead us through the bulk of this presentation and talk a lot about the different third-party certifications that we're seeing as a part of this program. And yeah, we'll talk sort of the ins and outs of a lot of those certifications and answer any questions that folks have. So feel free to put those into the chat and we will get to them sort of at the end of our presentation. But here's a really high level look at what we'll cover today. So we'll do a quick overview of the different certifications available through this program. And then, yeah, like I said, summarize and answer some questions. So that's where we'll spend most of our time, is really looking at the different third-party certifications that folks may be interested in. And similar to what Melissa was just saying, there are 3 different compliance pathways that are available to you to meet the decarbonization components of DRI and New York Forward. I think if you're listening into this today, you're probably most interested in, or still sort of in that decision-making phase when it comes to this. But yeah, this is the one for third-party certifications. There are, just important to note that there are additional third-party certs that are out there available in the market today that we may not go over. So if you're interested in pursuing another third-party cert that we don't discuss today, feel free to bring that up to us, and that's something that we can consider on sort of a case-by-case basis as to whether it sort of meets the intent of DRI and New York Forward. So just a quick note there. So, like I said before, Michelle and I, who you'll hear from in a moment, are from the NYF team, and we are sort of the lead decarbonization consultant to DOS on this program, or on these programs, DRI and New York Forward. We really lead the other consultants that you see on the slide here in terms of this decarbonization effort, and we usually are sort of the one interacting with the project sponsors and design teams and whatnot, and then we loop in sort of these other consultants as needed, on sort of a case by case or topic by topic basis. So most of your interactions will probably be with the NYF team, and just to give a flavor of all the different things that we can assist with. It's a lot of, helping you think through your compliance pathway. What is most applicable for your project? What might make the most sense based on your specific scope and project goals? And then we can help with some more specific, like, measures and savings and cost type of information as you're getting more specific with your project and the upgrades that you're going to be making. Help sort of think through some of those things. We can lend a hand when it comes to energy modeling, and then on sort of the green building certification, which I think is pertinent to the discussion today, sort of help navigating that process as we go, and so on. There's sort of a whole bunch of things we can assist with. I think if you're challenged by something during your decarbonization planning or budgeting process, or just thinking through what strategies you want to implement, that's what we're here for. So you can always shoot us a question, and we'll rope in the right people to try and support you on this effort. We'll have all of our contact information at the end as well if you don't have that yet. And then just to give you sort of a flavor of the other subject matter experts that we really have on our team through the sub consultants, Poly Castrucci Architects, Cartman Consulting, and Savin Engineers all sort of have their little niches that they are experts in. Um, and yeah, just know that it's a strong team, and we're here to support you. In sort of the planning phase, in the design phase, through construction, and then towards the end for sort of final compliance with the program as well. So big thing. Reach out if you have questions. We're here to help. Folks may
Uh,
have or may remember this slide from some of the other webinars and meetings that we've done with you and your teams in the past. But as you may recall, sort of three different compliance pathways that you can take as a part of New York Forward and DRI. And we're honing in today on this third option, the third party certifications. So we'll spend a bunch of time talking through that. If you're still thinking through, which path you want to go with, um, just a quick word on each of these. New York Stretch is perhaps the most common one that we're seeing folks want to pursue through these programs. Um, and it's really the more advanced energy code that New York State has. It's especially useful for buildings that are maybe taking under a renovation project rather than a whole new construction project. And it's got sort of a prescription compliance pathway as well as a performance based pathway. So we're seeing a lot of folks interested in sort of that prescriptive improvement pathway as a compliance path option. The second is the Energy Star uh, uh, compliance pathway, and we actually held a webinar on this just yesterday. So if you're more interested in learning kind of the details of that, I'm sure Melissa, Susan will be sharing that information if they haven't already yet. And you can check out that webinar to learn more. But essentially, what you have to do for that is use a tool called Target Finder and achieve a score of 90 or better to show that you're in compliance with the DRI in New York Forward decarbonization requirements. So that's another option that we're seeing, and probably one for buildings that are new construction, focused on new construction, and then also targeting a very kind of high performance building as well, because that score of 90 or better is is a high threshold to meet. And then lastly, the third party certifications. You can see in this box here, there's a number of different programs that you can follow. LEAD maybe being the most popular, the one that folks know have heard of, that we're seeing folks want to pursue. So that's one of the options that Michelle will talk through here in a moment. Yeah, again, if you're still considering your compliance path options, want to kind of get into the details with us further, we're happy to have additional conversations with you, your design teams, and whoever else to kind of help you make that decision. Now, when it comes to sort of selecting which path is right for you, I touched on a couple of these things already, but we use this chart here, handy little chart that we'll share afterwards as well. And basically, the intent is just to sort of look down the first line here. If you're a new construction project, really all of the compliance pathways are applicable to you. Third party certification certainly, makes sense to um, for a new construction project as well as a major renovation. If you're doing a partial upgrade, that's where a third party certification probably doesn't make as much sense. Is not as applicable. Um, Again, if you're pursuing a very high performing building or a very low energy consuming building, again that third party certification probably will make sense. It's probably also important to note that a lot of these, excuse me, third party certifications uh, look at a lot beyond just energy usage in the building. They're looking sort of the building at the building as a whole, thinking about things like transportation and comfort, health, things like that when it comes to building a new building. And again, we'll touch on that more, but it's much broader than just energy consumption. Um, so other reasons that you would go with the third party certification are, if you need that for some other reason, if you're just personally interested in getting a lead certification or, um, a passive house cert, that could be one reason why you pursue this as your compliance path. If your community sort of incentivizes or requires that, again, that might be another reason to go forward with this pathway. And then lastly, for my portion of this is the documentation sort of requirements of the different pathways. So yeah, each pathway has its own requirements in terms of the information that you submit to DOS and to Noresco to verify that you're in compliance with that pathway. And I'll just focus in quickly here on Path 3, the third party certification. The main components that we need are, I'll skip down to maybe this first, the copy of the submittal information that you share, excuse me, that you share with that program, like with Lead. If you're sharing documents with them, we'll want to see that and just be able to verify that as well. And then the other big things are photos of the installed equipment, product spec sheets, design drawings, and then the report indicating that you're in compliance with the base energy code in New York. So, in terms of documentation requirements, third party certification is uh, fairly straightforward and um, not overly onerous, I would say, on the project sponsor. But it really all depends on kind of this bottom one here, the what is required of that third party cert that you're using. That um, certifying body will require you to submit documents to receive that recognition. So that's where probably the bulk of your time will be spent is sort of going through that process. So that's a factor in all this decision making as well, as how much effort you want to put into that process there. And that is exactly what we'll focus a bit more on here, or part of what we'll focus a bit more on here over the next few slides, kind of talking through those different certifications. And for that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Michelle.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As John said, I'm Michelle Hendrick. I'm a program director with Noresco overseeing our building certifications team. And as of today, we will be providing a very high overview, focusing on several of the building certification pathways that can help support option 3, the path 3 option. And as John had mentioned before, just please keep in mind, there are other options than what we're presenting on today that maybe aren't included in here. We also, just on each slide as well, we have the website to each one of those organizations and kind of the overview in more detail, as well as a high level certification registration fee for each one of those pathways. And whatever that it's typically provided to the governing body for that certification pathway. We have based these fees on average size of buildings, which is about like 50,000 square feet or less. Most of these fees are based off of square footage, so that's kind of where those ranges can come into. There also can be some discounts, whether it's a government entity or small business, that do allow for discounts as well. Also just please keep in mind too, with these fees, it does not include any fees that if you did need to hire a third party certification consultant to help assist your design and construction teams, and or if a pathway requires an on-site third party assessor, it does not include those at that time. So just please keep in mind on those things. So as we go forward, we wanted to start first with the LEED certification. So as John had mentioned, this is primarily one of the most well-known out of all international and whole building certification pathways, especially here in the United States. It's Also one that has been the most straightforward with the certification pathway and aligns the most with like best practices within the building industry, as well as an alignment with current codes, such as, you know, your international building code, but then also on the IECC side or ASHRAE requirements, things like that. It has a lot of alignment there, which really can relate to your overall basis of design or your owner's project requirements for each project. With LEED, it is monitored by the USGBC, the United States Green Building Council, and it is reviewed by the GBCI entity. With LEED, it does focus on a whole building approach. So whether it's a new building, an existing building, retrofit, but it mainly focuses on the decarbonization, resiliency, embodied carbon, materiality of things, but it also focuses on like quality of life as well as ecological and conservation items and measurements on the project site. So really looking at that whole building approach, both inside the building as well as outside, and how it has that context looking beyond the building. So how is it connecting to the buildings around it? How are we getting to that site? Things like that. So currently there's some big changes with LEED that's going to be occurring here pretty soon. But currently we are under version 4 and 4.1. But in Q1 of 2026, we will be fully moving into version 5. So it's really exciting. Version 4 and 4.1 have been around for about 10 years or so. So it's a really good time to really start reanalyzing, getting that alignment back with local codes and determining what works best with those project types. So V5 resources have been released already that project teams can start being reviewed. And then they should be fully starting to roll out all of the credit forms and all those requirements by the end of the year. Please keep in mind, addendums are usually provided quarterly with new updates and new items to be aware of. So also, one thing that's going to be different under V5 is one of the main goals is trying to update that energy requirement every 5 years. So just as an example, right now under V5, it will be more of your, if you go for a performance-based pathway, it is the ASHRAE 2019 with the stretch to ASHRAE 90.1 2022 paths. So really starting to push the envelope and boundaries on those energy side of things. Just for those of you who are currently working on new projects that are maybe exploring LEED, you still can register under V4 and V4.1 for any new construction. So your BD plus C, your ID plus C, or your operation and maintenance projects through the end of Q1 2026. And then those that are already currently actively working on a LEED V4 project, you have at least 6 years after that close of registration. So approximately 2032 that you can finish up your V4 and V4.1 already registered projects. So as most of you are aware, LEED has many different pathway options, whether it's a new construction, major renovation. They also have interiors options, existing buildings and operation maintenance, as well as neighborhood development, site, and LEED for homes. It looks at all different types of project types too, whether it's an airport all the way through a K-12, higher education, multifamily, just a range that it can be applied to for the different project types. Please keep in mind with LEED for homes, that one's probably the most different out of all the other pathways under LEED, where you do have requirements for on-site testing, such as like a HERS rater or a LEED for homes assessor. really making sure that there's duct leakage test, air infiltration, and your air ventilation requirements. So just a little different versus like new construction or interiors, which would our on-site testing would be a commissioning agent. So this is just a little different. For LEED, it is based off of a 110-point system with prerequisites, which are requirements, as well as credits that are both from a prescriptive as well as a performance-based pathway. There's 4 different levels for certification, so certified, silver, gold, and platinum. And typically you have to have from certified, it's the 40 to 49 points, silver's 50 to 59 points, gold 60 to 79 points, and then 80 points for that platinum. So you really have that pretty big jump between the gold and platinum levels. Currently, LEED does not require any recertification at this time, but if you are pursuing an operation and maintenance pathway, that does require every 3 years a recertification, and that does look a little bit more in depth on your energy audit requirements and the various thresholds with operations side. So even looking at as an option for transportation and overall site waste usage. So looking at your procurement, where are your occupants coming to and from the site, if you have deliverables like deliveries, what type of fuel, things like that are being used to get to the site. And as mentioned previously, the only requirement as of right now for on-site testing is going to be your commissioning agent. And then for the LEED for homes, that one will be the homes assessor. All right. So then moving next to well. So well, very similar to LEED, which you'll find a lot of similarities between most of these pathways. Well is a well building certification is a performance-based system for measuring and certifying as well as monitoring features from the built environment that impact human health and the well-being. So we really look at all these items within the building. How is it affecting those occupants? So we do performance testing through the air, water, nourishment, thermal comfort, sound, light, fitness, mind, as well as the community. So well, very similar to LEED is reviewed by GBCI, but it is monitored and overseen by the International Well Building Institute, or IWBI. WELL is also an internationally known certification pathway. It is going on about 10 to 12 years now within the industry. It does have direct overlap with many building certification pathways, and sometimes is often grouped with other certifications, such as like a LEED, BRAM, or Green Globe project. It also can be applied to any project type, whether it's new or existing, and registration can really occur at any time. It also is very adaptable to any type of project as well, as long as there's a full-time occupant or understanding, because it is that really occupant-focused side. So, well does have a requirement that kind of goes above and beyond just the built environment projects, like from a project team perspective. It really does require a full key stakeholder involvement early on. So not just your client, the design and construction team members, but we're also would require involvement from like your HR side. What are those benefits to help reduce absenteeism and sick time and benefits? So we look at HR policies. We also look at those facilities and operations team, understanding what type of products are being used within this space once it is occupied, such as your cleaning plan or integrative pest management plans. We also look and evaluate with your food vendors as well as furniture or other FF&E vendors. So just a little bit of more robust project team and making sure that it really has all those key stakeholder involvement early on. Like I said earlier, WELL really focuses on that health and wellness of those building occupants, and it does have requirements for on-site testing that has to be done by a verified third-party assessor, so it's called a performance verifier. And they really focus, those folks will go on site and test the quality of air, water, sound, light, and thermal comfort against the various thresholds. So whether it's a new constructed project, making sure that that new project, the design intent has been executed through the construction, and now it's actually being performed on site. And so that's a typically a two-part certification process. So you have your documentation side as well as your on-site verification side. We're currently under a V2 version 2 pathway, and IWBI does release quarterly updates. The scoring is also very similar to LEED. It's based out of the 110 points for certification levels, same threshold levels as LEED as well. The only difference, instead of it being certified level, it's called the bronze level. And so depending on what type of project type, whether it's a multifamily or an office building, there are certain requirements that you have to meet for each one of those levels. So WELL does require recertification every 3 years, as well as some annual ongoing reporting for some features in order to maintain certification. So just some things to be aware of. All right. The next one is Fitwell. Those in New York, you're probably very familiar with Fitwell, which is very common in the New York and the East Coast area. Very similar to WELL, Fitwell also focuses on that occupant comfort and wellness versus more that operation reduction and building efficiency side of things, such as like what LEED or other building certifications would focus on. Fitwell was developed by the CDC as a more affordable certification pathway to track healthy building features and strategies. There are no prerequisites and there are no on-site testing requirements, which really is helpful and useful for many projects. Certification is also based on achievement of features or strategies, and we look at 7 different impact categories. So including like your community and that connection to the site, health, reducing absenteeism, social equity, also the well-being and access to healthy foods, occupant safety, as well as increasing like physical activity. So a lot of connections, like how can you utilize the stairs versus using an elevator, things like that. So there are also, with this certification pathway, there are also many different building types, like single and multi-tenant buildings, whether it's a new building or an existing building, as well as interior projects. And then also with multifamily residential projects as well. Fitwell is monitored and reviewed by the Fitwell like certification team, as well as the Center for Active Design. And it also had a lot of GSA overlap as well during this development. Similar to WELL, Fitwell also has direct overlap with other certification options such as LEED. So it is also currently under version 3 pathway. So that was just released in 2024, and they also release about quarterly updates as well. So again, trying to listen to the feedback from the community and of what best practices are, and trying to get those incorporated into the new reference guide. Fitwell scoring is slightly different than WELL or LEED. It is based off of a star percentage program, and it's each strategy is a weighted percentage. So it is typically 1 star, which is around 90 points or so, 2 stars, and then 3 stars. Fitwell, like WELL, also requires recertification every 3 years in order to maintain certification. All right. We'll touch very little bit on the Energy Star. As we know, we had the previous Energy Star specific presentation yesterday. Obviously, it overlaps with Path 2. But Energy Star also really overlaps with LEED and other Green Globes and other pathways as well. Energy Star, as you is a free program, and it really is one of those guiding principles for benchmarking and utilizing those tools. And it's a very great option to use through the portfolio manager. You can also release and track your data for energy as well as water. So it really depends what your overall goals are for your project. But it also, you go through the portfolio manager online tool. It focuses primarily on that energy reduction of everything. We must score a 75 out of the 100 points to be based on to have Energy Star certified. It is also a renewal annually, and you must be occupied with your building for at least 12 months in order to start pursuing it. So you do need that data from your utilities for at least 12 months. And then one of those requirements also is on-site visit for the requirements for your lighting levels and CO2 sensing, as well as getting it signed off by a professional engineer and or licensed architect for that application. So, all right. Moving into Green Globes. Again, Green Globes is another certification option that is a whole building certification pathway. It evaluates the environmental sustainability, again, occupant health and wellness, as well as resiliency. This pathway is very similar to LEED, and then what we'll get into here next is BREEAM, where there's certain requirements that review overall efficiencies of water and energy reduction within the building. Green Globes has both options for a prescriptive as well as a performance-based pathway. This certification has a variety of options for commercial building types, such as new construction, core shell, existing buildings, as well as interiors. It doesn't have as many options for the multiple different market types or sectors, but it is also really recognized as one of those certification pathways that GSA and other government projects emphasize on that. So it's typically with Green Globes guiding principles as well as LEED. That is one of those recognized pathways. There's currently no residential program at this time within Green Globes, but I do feel like that will probably change here soon, but just something to keep in mind when comparing and understanding what works best for your projects. Green Globes is monitored by GBI, which is Green Building Institute, and it does require a third-party assessor for on-site reviews. There are some options where sometimes that on-site review can be virtual and doing that walkthrough as well. But again, working with your project team and your consultant, that can help really understand what makes sense for each project. Green Globes is based on a 1,000-point system, and its achievement is based off of percentage based on the weighted scores for the various features. And kind of similar to Fitwell, where there are 4 levels, but it's based off of globes. So it can be achieved from the 1, 2, 3, or 4 globes, 4 being the highest. So, all right. Excuse me. All right. So next is BREEAM. BREEAM is fairly new in the US market. My experience has been that I've seen it more on the East Coast side. But it is actually older than LEED, and most people do not know that, but it originated in the UK and is very popular in Europe, which kind of makes sense why I think you see it a little bit more on the East Coast side. But with BREEAM, it is very similar to LEED, and where it focuses on that design, construction, and performance side. So really looking at your energy, your land use, site impact reduction, materials, pollution, not only once the building's occupied, but pollution also during, if it's a new constructed project. What's that pollution like during the construction side? Looking at the waste from not only from your solid, like from your construction waste or things like that, but also from the waste from energy and water, that's temporary energy and water waste reduction that's being used during construction phase. So really tracking those as well. BREEAM is also an international certification pathway, and it does, like we just talked about, it does also look at those occupant health and well-being side as well. So, you know, in order to have a successful project, those occupants really do need to be thought about. So, so just like the other certifications, it is that whole building certification. One thing on the energy side with BREEAM, it's really heavily weighted on regional energy sources and what does that grid look like of where that energy is coming from. What does that, how does that performance, how is that grid even changing over time, things like that too. So that's one thing that we'll notice for anyone that pursues LEED V5, they are going to be starting to incorporate some of those regional aspects to it as well. So you're really doing that comparison, not just from an ASHRAE level, but that comparison of other similar building types within your region and all that too. So with BREEAM, there are different pathways. It's for new construction, retrofits, as well as fit out projects, and then existing buildings. You do currently, right now, you do have to, if you have a mixed use project, let's say a multi-family project as well as a core shell office space project, you do have to do 2 different certifications. As of right now, you can't do a full building certification like you could for LEED or Fitwell, things like that. So there's just some things to keep in mind. It is a performance-based pathway, so there is a requirement to have an on-site assessor not only review your documentation phase, but it also has the on-site assessment once it's been occupied and built. So very similar to how well is. It is a performance-based, there are 5 different BREEAM ratings, and it is, again, more of a weighted average scale. But those 5 levels are pass, good, very good, excellent, and outstanding. So, and BREEAM was developed by the Building Research Establishment, so BRE, and is reviewed also by BRE and the accredited assessors that we just spoke about. And then for both that documentation and then the on-site requirements. All right. Okay, so NGBS is the National Green Building Standard, and this one is offered by Home Innovation Research Labs. So very similar to LEED as USGBC is. So NGBS is actually the only homes and multifamily certification pathway that has been approved by ANSI. All categories do need to have to meet higher thresholds in order to meet that next level of certification. So it's a little different than so they all like build upon each other versus others where you can kind of pick and choose which ones work for you in your project. So the main focus is on the design and the construction side. So it is looking at your lot development, still looking at that energy water use reduction, as well as your IEQ or your indoor air management, ventilation requirements. And then it also looks at the operation and maintenance of how is this building being occupied, working with those facilities folks once after those 12 months. So it is a prescriptive and point-based level. So 4 levels: 2, bronze, silver, gold, and then emerald. So as you can see, a lot of them have similar around that 4 level certification. And then some of that, the naming convention just changes slightly too. So, but NGBS applies to both single and multifamily or some mixed use projects. So, right. So the next one is Living Future, or through like the Living Building Challenge. Living Building Challenge is a certification pathway that focuses on regenerative design and overlaps with people, community, and nature. These buildings are pretty fascinating, where they're almost like these living, breathing machines. And so they have 7 categories, and each category is called a petal. And that's those petals are place, water, energy, health, happiness, equity, and then beauty. So each of those petals could be also looked at a smaller scale as these individual pathways too, or from a whole building certified side, which then you have to do certain areas from each category. So projects can achieve different levels of certification, like I just said, ranging from that whole building to those individual pathways. It is reviewed by the third party, the Living Future Institute. It does focus a lot on that design construction as well as performance. So a lot more on that new construction side. Some of the other like petal pathways can also look at if one of your project goals is a net zero energy project, you can pursue just that portion. So it really gives you some good options too, rather than if the whole building pathway isn't something that aligns with all of your project goals, it gives you these opportunities to look at that and still be able to showcase those stories. So the performance-based side, in order to achieve certification, you do have to monitor the project once it's occupied for 12 months in order to earn certification. So again, very performance-based, making sure what we've designed for those new buildings, what we've designed, implemented within that, and then actually constructed, making sure that we're meeting all those intents for that certification pathway. So, all right. Next is FIAS, or Passive House. So Passive House certification is also another international pathway. This certification focuses on implementation of heating and cooling strategies while also reducing the active heating and cooling system. So really using all of our passive designs and approaches that if you're an architect, what we've all learned during our architecture initial programs in your undergraduate or graduate degrees. So really looking back at how can we minimize those mechanical systems and really emphasize the orientation, massing, all of those various strategies, operable windows of how to reduce those active loads. Reviews are conducted by Passive House certifiers, and they have to be accredited through the Passive House Institute. The main focus is on the design and construction again, and then this is, as I just mentioned, that passive house design strategies, but also looking at these go hand in hand with resiliency of different strategies, durability of your materials and of your building. The emphasis also on your indoor air quality as well. It can be looked at from a whole building certification, but its primary use, per the name, is for single family and or the multifamily housing projects, and are for just new construction and major renovation projects. Passive House does integrate with the Department of Energy, Zero Energy Ready Homes, as well as EPA, Indoor Air Plus, and the Energy Star portfolio pathway as well. This is a performance-based, very stringent on-site verification. Typically like HERS rater level would have to come on site, make sure that we meet all those categories. And then the scoring is based off of the overall efficiency of the project. So as well as the any on-site renewable energy. So that's how it allows us to hit certain scores. So, all right, next. All right, so enterprise green communities. And this one is going to be the last one that we'll talk about really quickly, but Enterprise Green Communities is the only national green building program created with and for affordable housing sector. So their primary goal is to advance that racial equity through green building. It is very, very community oriented. So it is a collaboration between investors, developers, the builders, as well as policymakers, healthcare practitioners have all come together in order to create this certification pathway. The process is also very similar to like a LEED for homes or the NGBS green rating system. So it's really, you're integrating that design approach, but you're having this back and forth communication with who those residents would be within the building, having that say and incorporating that into the design and into the construction. The overall goal is to have a path to zero energy and understanding where that zero emissions, putting those strategies and creating a roadmap to hit that eventually in the future if they can't do it day one. Also a lot of various options for how can you create a healthy living practice. Again, with like what type of MERV filters are you inputting, what type of operable windows, things like that. Also air tightness, everything that goes into those home certification side. Enterprise Green Communities also promotes those water efficiency standards, so making sure water sense, fixtures, things like that, as well as just your healthy building products going into that, as well as like the resiliency requirements and really understanding what those local climate hazards are. Enterprise Green Communities is reviewed by EGC, and it also has to have third-party assessors review those. And it is based off of like your prescriptive and point-based system, and it also applies just to your single family as well as your multifamily affordable housing only. So, all right. And then just in closing, things to consider, if your team does choose to pursue the Path 3 option by utilizing a certification achievement, we really want to make sure we understand what those priorities are for your team and your owner regarding your sustainability goals, and how does those each rating system best aligns with your project and project team. We also want to make sure understanding what the overall scope is, understanding what your current code requirements are for the project. And again, looking into that basis of design where if it's already included in there, what are those no to low cost options and how those align best with those certification pathways. So others, making sure to compare and understand timelines and reviews, as especially where it relates to field verifications, on-site monitoring, and even just like your recertification, things like that, making sure, like we mentioned in well or fit well, things like that, making sure that it works with your project schedule and your occupancy dates. So just as an example, if you're doing LEED indoor air quality site as air testing, that air test actually has to be completed prior to occupancy. But if you're doing well, that air test has to be done post occupancy. So just making sure you understand all of those pathways. And then I would also say too, like work with a team such as your architecture team, engineering, and or a third party consulting firm that are familiar with these certification pathways, because they can help guide you in your team that what makes the most sense for your projects, and then how you'll be most successful too in achieving those certification pathways. So that is all I have. So I can hand it over to John, Melissa, and Susan. But yeah, thank you everyone for your time and attention.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I feel like we should do a quiz of all the different levels of each of the different certifications. That would be pretty much impossible. Globes, numbers, pass, fail. Yeah, it's a lot to keep straight. I have a question. I don't see any in the chat just yet, so maybe I'll just ask one, Michelle, while we're waiting and seeing if anyone has any. Do you feel like any of these, the ones that you went over, are most applicable to sort of smaller scale, like 5, 10, 15,000 square foot projects that are maybe mixed use, sort of commercial on the first level, and then, residential, multifamily sort of above that? Are any of these, would you say, most applicable to that type of building?
Yeah, so to me, I still see LEED as kind of that number one certification pathway that I think most of the project teams are most familiar with, and it does have a lot of it does cater really well towards small projects too, and mixed use projects where you can do one full certification for all those different use types.
Right.
And so I do think from even just like a certification, like price point per square foot, to they do have like a min that you do have to pay for, but I do think it aligns where it can be the most in alignment too with local codes too. So again, kind of looking at those no to low cost options of what's already required of the project, I think LEED has the most alignment for that. So
Gotcha.
yeah, Fitwell is also a good one too, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I don't think I see anything else in the chat. Susan or Melissa, anything you want to raise at this point, or should we say farewell to everyone? This is just last slide. This is all of our contact information from the Noresco side. If you have questions afterwards, like I said, feel free to reach out to Michelle or myself, or if you're already working with a member of the Noresco team, Michael, Michelle, the other Michelle, or Rachel, feel free to just keep kind of communicating with them. We're all sort of working on specific regions within the state, so you might already be linked up with the right person, but you can always reach out to any one of us. We'll get you going in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Michelle and John, for the presentation today. Still not seeing any questions in the chat. So thank you all for attending. Like John said, if you have any questions, please let us know, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.